first of all, thank you again for all joining us this morning, and importantly, to give you your full title, Dr. Cliona Hannon, CEO of the Katharine Howard Foundation. I'm Dee Butler. I'm the head of growth here at Submit.com, and Cliona and her team at the Katharine Howard Foundation, I may say the KHF, so I don't get tongue-tied. But yeah, so Cliona has been a client with us now for over a year at this point, certainly. And I've invited her here today just to kind of have a chat more than anything in relation to how they're using the Submit.com platform. For those of you, I know many of you know very well who we are, but just to give you a heads up, our platform, Submit.com, allows organizations to collect and manage online submissions, whatever that may be for. In this case, for this purpose of this conversation, it's for grant applications. So first of all, Dr. Hannon, thank you again. If you want to tell us a little bit about your foundation, and in particular then the Children's Promise Grant that I know you've used Submit for previously.
Yeah, thanks, Dee. So Katharine Howard Foundation is, it focuses on prevention and early intervention programs aimed at children and their families who are living in poverty or dealing with the challenges of poverty. And last year we opened the Children's Promise Grants Programme, which is looking for promising practices and projects that, you know, are based within community organisations, small-scale organisations usually, and aim to tackle the corrosive impacts of poverty. And the programme aims to provide financial and other supports, usually on a multi-annual basis, to selected organisations. So that's us.
And how long has the Katharine Howard Foundation been running?
So it was set up in 1979 as a kind of a relatively small organisation. And then, you know, sometime after that, in the late 90s, my predecessor, Noel Spring, took the reins and spent a couple of decades building it and establishing its reputation and creating impact through a variety of funding programs and other supports.
And before Submit, we'll get to that in a bit, but before Submit, how would these grants have been administered or applied for in the first place, but then more so organised and managed in the back end?
Well, we are quite a small organisation, you know, we're a small team. And so my understanding, obviously I've been here for 2 years, but my understanding is that prior to me joining, other grants programs would have been managed through kind of an online application, more of a paper-based application that people would email in. And that it would be kind of building relationships with organisations along particular themes like parent and toddler groups or parent support initiative, and then that the people would kind of on the basis of that relationship apply for funding, but it was more of a manual process.
Yeah. And in terms of that then, what were the main challenges faced when managing applications and selections in that regard?
Well, I think there are a couple of problems with it at this stage. There, you know, one is the security of the information that's being sent in. One is being able to have, you know, a board of trustees or multiple people safely review confidential information on organisations in different locations. And then the other is, you know, collating and ensuring that you have all the information for reporting purposes. So, you know, if you're dealing with applications that are being emailed in, it is messy. It's also intensive to, you know, create from that any meaningful reporting. And it's hard for the applicant organisations as well, because ultimately their engagement with you and the reporting to you is going to be more complicated.
Yeah.
So, in a small team, it doesn't really make sense to use manual processes anymore.
And it's quite time consuming. And as you say, the
Yeah.
reporting itself and collating all that information into something meaningful,
Yeah.
measuring impact is massive now for every organization.
Yeah.
And to be able to translate data on an Excel sheet, into something visual even, can make a huge difference. So in terms of Submit then, when you suppose came from a very paper-based process to something much more streamlined like our submission platform, can you give any examples of how you've seen the difference, or how it's impacted you and how you're managing the funds?
Well, I suppose the starting point for me, because I've come from designing processes like this before in education mainly, is that it's something that's usable by the people we want to support. So, that's the reporting is useful internally, and cost savings and time savings are useful. But we want it to be something that's usable and useful for the organizations we work with and their starting point. And, I suppose another factor for me is that with the organizations we work with, I like to help them to focus on and refine their kind of how they consider impact and what they consider, how they know what they're doing and whether they're doing it well. And so I think, with Submit, we're not just able to capture information and report it to the people we need to report it to. We're able to use the platform to help organizations to do what they're doing and to think about what they're doing more effectively. Part of that is because it's kind of it's a customizable platform, so we can adapt it for the information we think will help them to improve their practice. And then, it's one place that they can upload or complete anything they need to upload or complete. So we hope for them it's an easier process. And, for us, it's an easier process because there's quite a bit of work that goes in at the start to kind of getting the right, making sure what you're asking is understandable. So, it's a really good idea to pilot it with a few people who aren't too close to it. That the way you've designed your forms, because, Submit kind of gives you an infrastructure and then you design it, which I think is a good thing. And then you can refine it over time. So it's not just for people to apply to, it's also for people to report through. So that means you can actually collate the numbers. If we have 17 organizations, we can look at the numbers, or we can look at the outcomes, the qualitative outcomes across all those organizations. And then we can share it and discuss it with all the organizations, rather than it just being it's not a numbers game. Like, it's really about a developmental process, not just for us so we can learn, but also so the organizations we work with can learn.
Yeah. So it really, using platform like Submit, it's not just making an impact on your organization, but as you said, it trickles down to every user, every end user, be it from the front end, an applicant, as we call them, or again, the board of directors that need to have, privy to certain information and, for approval purposes. So there's an awful lot of stakeholders that are involved, obviously, in the grant management process, but using one platform, as you said, it's one place where everybody can access what they need to access and upload and so on. A one-stop shop almost, I suppose. And certainly, again, security and GDPR, and that's another massive aspect to the whole thing. It's not a case of emails everywhere with attachments and links to different places, which it can be kind of hectic to keep track of everything. And certainly with so many people involved. In terms of future plans then with the Katharine Howard Foundation and other grants or schemes you have in the pipeline, or just in the future, looking forward in the next 5 years, how do you see your organization growing or remaining steadfast as it is, but using more platforms like Submit or technology, I suppose?
I mean, I think we are not very big. So what I think is we don't have any plans really what we want to do is use the resources we have to support to provide as much support as we can financially and in other ways, and not to spend a huge amount of money on our team size, you know. So this allows us, like in bigger organizations, they may go for different platforms that cost a lot more. I mean, Submit is a relatively, for the size of our organization, is a big budget line, but it's not a big budget line compared to a lot of other systems. It's pretty affordable. And so, you know, for us, there's me, an administrator and a finance person. We are able to get what we need for this grants program out of that process. And also, you know, it does lend itself, if we decide to create a bigger grants program or a grants program in a different niche area, to collaborating with other organizations who are funders, you know, because we have the infrastructure there, and we can therefore manage, you know, money effectively, if you like, money and reporting effectively.
Very good. So yeah, I suppose the platform in itself, it is, as you mentioned, it is very customizable, right? But it can grow with your organization. It can, like, we have enterprise level clients, you know, government departments using our platform, much larger, you know, corporate organizations.
And us,
It, you know, but I suppose the key thing is that for all of our clients across the board, we give them the same, I say, toolbox, but the same functionality. We don't believe in limiting our clients in terms of, oh, well, you're a small nonprofit or a small organization, so you don't need all the bells and whistles. You can make do with this. It's not about that. You know, the level of support, the onboarding and the setup, certainly, I'm sure you noticed, it's very much hands-on, very personal to us on the team, to ensure that every client gets the full use out of the platform. So you may not need all the functionality at the moment that's available there, but it is accessible to you. It is there to use it, and we'll show you how to use it. And I know the guys on the support team are fantastic for offering suggestions if and when having conversations with the onboarding and setup with new clients is, have you tried this, you know? And so in terms of the forms that you have, you said, you know, the 17 organizations that are applying. What do they look like, and what is the information you need to gather in order to process their applications?
Well, in our grants program last year, we had 172 applications, and we went through a couple of different stages. So we went through a stage 1 and a stage 2, and the first stage was an expression of interest. And the second stage was a phase 2 application for a proportion of those who'd completed the expression of interest. And so, you know, it's your basic organization information, but then it's information about your project, the kind of outcomes it's going to achieve, hopefully, what it's going to cost you to do that, what your organization is like, you know, who's in it, what are they doing, and then, you know, what kind of impact you hope to have over time. So how will you know that what you're doing is working and having an impact on the children and families you're working with? So kind of what unique value your project has. So why is it needed? Why is it kind of important to support? So they're the kind of things we ask. And then people usually complete most of that on the platform, but it also allows for people to add documentation, you know. So in our case, we ask for some of the governance documents and also some communications pieces. And then we can use those pieces to create visuals of the projects, which is really nice. And we did that of the selected projects. But, you know, the thing that's also important for people to bear in mind is when we started over a year ago, you know, one of the questions was, well, will the Board of Trustees be able to use the platform? Because there were varying levels of technological ability. And will the community-based organizations be able to? And, you know, luckily we've all had a crash course in technology in the last few years. But one of the, you know, one of the great outcomes of the process for us is that we had very we had very few queries where people were not able to use the platform, whether trustees or the community-based organizations. So it is actually pretty easy to use. And I think as well, for people thinking about using this in some way, shape, or form, the fact that your team is responsive really helps. Because I think if you're new to, like, I have used a few different platforms for application processes, so I was comfortable I'd be able to do it. But if you're new to doing it, you don't want somebody based in Palo Alto who'll take 48 hours to respond. Like, you actually want somebody who gets that you're struggling with it and who pop an email to you and say, grand, let's work through this. So it really matters in the setup stage that it is customizable, affordable, and that the team behind it are responsive.
Just get me the pride in my life. That's something we take an awful lot of pride in. Thanks for, and it's lovely that you see that as well and you feel that the level of support with our team. We've got Sarah and Morgan there, they're fantastic. You know, they're probably the two main guys that you would have been speaking to. And it is something all clients say. And we've got clients internationally, not just local. I mean, we're based in Cork, if you can't tell by the accent. But yeah, we've got clients all over the world, from Hong Kong and Asia, in Middle East to Canada, Australia. And they all say the same thing, because sometimes even the time zones work to our advantage. You know, if someone has an issue during the day, they clock off. When they come back in the morning, it's done, because we're on the flip side working all night to get things right, if and when it happens, of course. But it is lovely, especially when we are local, and obviously you guys are based in Dublin, that you could even pick up the phone if you needed to. You know, we're that accessible. It's something we take a great pride in, definitely.
And that's one thing that, you know, because most people who, you know, in our industry anyway, who are using these systems are very people focused. Sometimes when you move to technology, it's not about the people anymore. It's about the reporting and the platform, and whereas this has to be first and foremost about the people that it's provided for, and including your trustees, but also importantly the organizations you're working with. So, you know, technology should be an enabler to greater collaboration and connectivity, not just the thing that's running the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think there's that. Obviously, a platform like Submit.com, look, it is a SaaS platform. It is a product to use, right? But fundamentally, as you said, it comes down to the end user, from each side of the coin. Somebody who's applying, somebody who's using that information. And certainly coming from a paper-based, it helps you almost take a breath. And you've got all the information you need, and you can really get down to the individual. As you said, the questions you're asking, the whys, you know, what impact you're going to use, you're going to have, and so on. And I think it's very important not to lose that, even though we are using, you know, some high-tech technology at times. And I joke, and I shouldn't really, but I always say our platform is easier than trying to use Facebook. You know, if you can manage Facebook, that again, we all had a crash test during COVID, perhaps trying to keep in contact with everybody around the world. Our platform is, it's nothing, you know, in comparison, really. And again, it's completely mobile friendly. I don't know if you'd had any instances where you've had to use it yourself, but even for administrators, you can log on your mobile device. It doesn't have to be on a desktop. And that comes back to the applicants and just the ease of use and the ease of the application. You don't need to have a desktop computer or even a laptop. You just kind of click on the link wherever you see it and apply there and then, you know. So a lot of the information you were collecting were the kind of file upload questions. Again, the platform can accept any file formats whatsoever, whatever's required. It's always fun for us to kind of think of, what's the best way to ask that question? You know, how can we, is it a text box, you know, 100 words or less, tell me about yourself and your program? Or is it something like, and I'm not sure if you used it or not, but we have the video cue question where it could be somebody, a little camera comes up like we're looking at each other now saying, you know, tell me about yourself. And again, that's getting to the person behind the form. Because again, depending on the application, the form they're completing, somebody can write something very eloquently and beautifully. It may not be a strength for another person, but on camera, you kind of go, wow, that's the person we want to help. And this is the organization that I think we can really make an impact with. So it's interesting for us on our side. is to look at not just the list of questions a client brings to us. It's figuring out, okay, well, what do you want to do with this information? How will you need to be able to report on it? And what's the best way? It's almost working backwards. So this is how we measure our impact based on the information we gathered. Well, what's the best way to collect that information so that we can actually get a really good picture of what we're doing here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know our team I enjoy that in particular. I know the team do as well. So future plans then for the Children's Promise Grant going forward. Do you want to tell us about the next round of when it's
yes,
open?
sure. It is opening at the end of February for 2024 applications, and they'll be a mix of 1 year and multi-annual support for strategic initiatives or strategic pieces of work that may either be a project or I guess a report or piece of research or whatever. So yeah, that's opening at the end of February, and we're looking forward to selecting up to 18 organizations to work with again. We have a kind of community of practice from the 2023 cohort, so we'll be growing that. And we're running the program in collaboration with Community Foundation Ireland. So yeah, we're looking forward to it and seeing what comes in through Submit.
Yeah, excellent. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for joining. I really enjoy the conversation.
No problem. Thank you.
I'm going to open up before I let you off the hook completely. Just to see if there are any questions. I'm going to open up the screen here. Oh, we have one hand raised. Yes, Hazel. Hi, Hazel.
Hi, Dee. How are you? Hi, Cliona.
Hi.
I was just wondering, because I know Cliona, your grant rounds are really supportive of those community-based organizations, the ones that wouldn't necessarily have a huge team behind them. And that's one area that we're looking at maybe hosting a session on in Philanthropy Ireland, is how can grant-making platforms and potentially be used as a leveler for people when they're making grant applications to support them in their grant writing. And I'm just wondering, have you come across that, how Submit.com is it accessible to those kind of smaller community groups who might not have the same level of even time just to invest in those?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. But one of the things we did last year, we gave in the guidelines document that we created, we gave, a contact here in KHF so that people would not be lost and not complete the process. So if they ran into problems, they could email us. I think we had about 30 queries through the whole cycle, which is pretty low, because it is quite intuitive. Now, one of the pieces of feedback we got from the selected projects is I had estimated that, the expression of interest would take half an hour to complete because it's kind of basic information. But they said that was completely underestimating. That was more like 45 minutes to an hour. And so I think it's good to give that kind of guideline. How long will it take me to do this? Because it's the kind of things that put people off and make them fearful. Is there someone I can contact who's an actual person? How long will this take me to do? And is there anything in it I'm not going to be able to answer? And the good thing about it is you can save your progress and pop out and then ask someone else, how would I finish this? Do we have this information, and come back to it. So if you give a kind of 6 to 8 week window, that helps. And the other thing we did, although they didn't work very well last year, but we're hoping they'll be better this year, we had a few tech issues, was we did Zoom information sessions a couple of weeks after the round opened. So we're like, store up all your queries, start the process, find out where you're stuck, and bring them to this kind of Zoom room and we'll figure them out together. So
that's a really good idea, actually, Cliona. If you're doing that again this year, you could invite one of us from Submit just to be there kind of on the tech end with questions, because very often, like that queries that come in and questions, very easy to do. I was speaking to support this morning and somebody was having, an applicant was having an issue on a form. They were recording themselves, like that video queue question I mentioned earlier, but it was actually on their side. So they were recording their video, but their sound wasn't on and they hadn't given the permission for the sound to be on. but they were convinced it was us was the problem, the platform was the problem, but
Yeah.
very easy to fix. We can check,
Yeah.
like, no, have you tried this? Because,
Yeah.
you know, definitely the guys in support have kind of, I would almost say, have seen everything at this stage.
Yeah.
Very easy fixes, you know,
Yeah.
little things like, you know, not turning off your phone properly in the middle of a webinar.
Yeah.
But these things can affect the whole, you know, the whole process and the experience as well, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd be welcome.
Yeah, we
I'm
do.
very
We've
happy to sit in.
one on the 12th and one on the 26th of March
Okay.
at 1 o'clock. Yeah,
Okay.
and actually to Hazel's question there as well, I think that we haven't done that video queue question, but I think for community, for smaller organizations, that could be a really good and meaningful way of capturing the essence of a project, because some people are much better able to talk than they are to kind of distill the point of a project into 100 or 200 words. And I think they shouldn't be excluded from the process because that's their strength. It's verbal communication rather than written. So I think that's a really good inclusive way of bringing in other potential applicants.
Yeah, and as well, just getting back to the expression of interest form and taking 45 minutes to an hour as opposed to 30 minutes, maybe that's something we could relook at, like you just mentioned, relook at some of the question types that can maybe help streamline and make it easier and just faster for people to, you know, to complete, while still ensuring you're getting everything that you need on your side, which is very important. Okay, so we're right on the button, 11:30. This is awesome. Thank you so much again, Cliona, for joining us today. If there's no other questions, which I don't think there are right now, please, my email here is d@submit.com. You have me all through LinkedIn, I'm sure, as well at this point. Do send me any questions you may have. I'm sure Cliona will be open to any further questions, or maybe a call if anybody wants to ask something off the record. But yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks everyone
Thank you so
for coming
much.
along. Bye.
Bye everybody. Thanks
Bye,
again.